The acrid smoke burned Sergeant James Chen's eyes as he moved through the burning ruins of Colony X-227. Distant explosions lit up the purple sky, and the screams of both humans and aliens filled the air. His mission was simple: evacuate any surviving civilians before the raiders returned. Area 4 cleared, moving to 5. He reported through his helmet comm, keeping his rifle ready. The raiders had already hit this sector hard, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. But something felt off about this sweep. That's when he heard it, a sound different from the chaos around him. A child's cry, but not human. James hesitated. His orders were clear: avoid contact with alien civilians. That was the job of the interspecies relief force. But the cry came again, desperate and afraid. Command, possible survivors in Area 5. Moving to investigate. He didn't wait for a response. Following the sound, James found himself at a collapsed residential building. The crying grew louder, mixed with another voice speaking in the musical tones of the Exotheory language. He activated his helmet's thermal scanner, picking up 2 heat signatures buried in the rubble. "Hello. This is Earth Force. I'm here to help," he called out, using his suit's universal translator. "Please, help us." The response came in broken English, weak and pained. James moved quickly, shifting debris until he found them. A Exotheory female lay trapped under a fallen beam, her silvery skin dulled with dust and blood. She was curled protectively around a small child, her daughter, he guessed. The mother's bioluminescent markings flickered weakly, a bad sign. The child looked up at him with large iridescent eyes, antennae quivering in fear. She couldn't have been more than 6 by human standards. The mother's eyes held both fear and determination as she pushed her daughter toward James. "Take her, please." The mother coughed, purple blood staining her lips. "I'm taking you both," James said firmly, already checking the beam pinning her. "What's your name?" "Lavera," she whispered. "Child is Mira." James activated his suit's enhanced strength mode. "Lavera, I'm going to lift this beam. When I do, pull yourself out. Myra, stay right where you are, okay?" The little girl nodded, her antennae now oriented toward him, with curiosity rather than fear. With a grunt, James lifted the beam. Lavera dragged herself free, but her leg was badly injured. More explosions rocked the area. The raiders returning for another pass. "Command, I need immediate medical evac in Area 5. 2 civilians, 1 critical." "Negative. Sergeant. Orders air." "They're coming with me." James cut in, making a decision that would change his life forever. He scooped up Mira with one arm and helped Lavera stand with the other. "I'm invoking Article 7 of the Humanitarian Code." Lavera stumbled, but her grip on his armor was strong. Mira wrapped her arms around his neck, her antenna giving off a soft blue glow, a sign of trust in Exotheory children. "Hold tight," James told them as he navigated through the rubble. Raiders' ships screamed overhead, their energy weapons turning the night into day. But James had something more important than orders now. He had promises to keep. Mira buried her face in his neck as they ran. Lavera kept pace despite her injury, her determination matching his own. They were almost to the evacuation point when a blast hit nearby, showering them with debris. James curved his body around Mira, shielding both mother and child with his armored form. In that moment, he felt something. A gentle touch in his mind, a whisper of gratitude and trust from both Exotheory. "Medical evac incoming, Sergeant," Command finally responded. "But you'll have some explaining to do." James watched the medship descend, its lights cutting through the smoke. "Copy that, Command." He looked at the alien child in his arms and her wounded mother beside him. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." The medical ship's bright lights hummed as it cut through the chaos, leaving the burning colony behind. Inside, James stood awkwardly in his dusty combat armor, watching the medical team work on Lavera. Mira refused to leave his side, her small hand gripping his armored finger. "Sir, we need to check the child too," a medic said, reaching for Mira. The little alien girl's antennae flattened against her head as she pressed closer to James. "I stay with New Protector," she said in broken English, using her species term for a guardian. Her mother's translator must have taught her some basics. James knelt down to her level. "Mira, these people need to make sure you're not hurt. I'll be right here." Lavera washed from her medical bed, her silvery skin still pale, but her wounds now sealed with advanced medical gel. "Mira, listen to the human," she said weakly in their language, which James's translator caught. The medical team worked quickly, their scanner lights playing over Mira's small form. James noticed how different the child looked under the bright lights. Her skin had a pearl-like sheen, and her antennae gave off soft pulses of blue-green light. "Sergeant Chen," a stern voice called. James turned to find Colonel Sarah Hayes entering the medical bay. "Care to explain why you violated direct orders about alien civilian contact?" Before James could answer, he felt a strange sensation, like a warm breeze in his mind. Mira had extended her antennae toward the colonel, and suddenly the officer's harsh expression softened. "She's projecting emotions," Lavera explained, her voice stronger. "It is how our kind shares truth. She shows your heart in saving us." The colonel rubbed her temple, looking confused but less angry. "That's quite something. But we still have protocols, Sergeant." "With respect, Colonel, the humanitarian code is clear." They were civilians in danger, and a commotion at the door interrupted them. A tall Exatheri official had arrived, his ceremonial robes marking him as a high counselor. "Where is Lavera, mate of research leader Valon?" he demanded. Lavera's bioluminescent markings dimmed. "Counselor Zirex, my mate." "Valon, it's he." The counselor's antennae drooped, a sign of mourning. "He fell defending the research center. The raiders, they were targeting our scientists." Mira began to cry, a high keening sound that made the ship's lights flicker. James felt her grief like a physical wave, and without thinking, he picked her up. Immediately, her crying softened to whimpers. "Impossible," Counselor Zirex whispered, watching the interaction. "She forms a bond link so quickly with a human." Lavera sat up straighter, despite her pain. "This human saved us both." Mira senses his heart. "Unauthorized empathic bonding with human personnel is forbidden," the counselor stated firmly. "The child must be placed with a proper Exatheri family." James felt Mira's grip tighten. The lights in the medical bay fluctuated wildly as her distress grew. Lavera's markings flashed with maternal anger. "She stays with us," Lavera declared, her voice carrying a strange resonance. "By our oldest laws, he is now her new protector. The bond has begun." Colonel Hayes watched the exchange with growing understanding. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "we should focus on their recovery first. Sergeant Chen can be assigned as their temporary security detail." The counselor's antennae twitched with displeasure, but he couldn't argue with both human and Exatheri authority figures. "This discussion isn't over," he warned before leaving. James looked down at Mira, who had fallen asleep in his arms, her antennae still faintly glowing blue, the color of trust. Lavera caught his eye and gave a slight nod. In the artificial night of the medical bay, surrounded by the soft beeping of machines, a new kind of family began to form, one that would challenge both human and Exatheri expectations. 2 weeks after the rescue, James walked through the refugee center's corridors with a bag full of children's books. The guards nodded at him. They were used to his daily visits by now. He found Lavera and Mira in their assigned quarters, the little girl practicing her English by watching human educational programs. "New protector." Mira jumped up, her antennae glowing bright blue with joy. She had started wearing her silver hair in 2 braids, copying the human children she saw in the videos. "Hello, little star," James said, using the Exatheri term of endearment he'd learned. He set down the bag and pulled out a colorful book. I brought something for you. Lavera watched from her chair, her leg almost fully healed. You spoiled her, she said, but her bioluminescent markings pulsed with warm colors. The cat in the hat. Mira read slowly, her antennae moving as she sounded out the words. What is cat? James pulled up a picture on his tablet. Myra's eyes widened with delight. We had similar creatures on our colony world, Lavera explained, though ours could fly. As Myra settled in to read, James sat down with Lavera. How are you both doing? Really? Lavera's markings dimmed slightly. The other refugees, some do not approve of Mira's attachment to you. They say we risk losing our culture by becoming too human. I'm sorry, James began, but Lavera held up a hand. Do not apologize. You should understand something about our people. She gestured to Mira, who was completely absorbed in her book. When we form bonds, they are deep and permanent. Mira has already accepted you as second father in her heart. Such bonds cannot be broken without great pain. James watched Mira sound out words to herself, her antennae glowing different colors as she encountered new concepts. I would never want to break that bond, he said quietly. Suddenly, Mira looked up. Father used to read to me like this, she said in their language, which James's translator caught. Her antennae drooped with sadness, but then she brightened. Will you read to me, second father? James felt that now familiar warm touch in his mind. Mira projecting her emotions. Lavera gasped softly. What is it? James asked, concerned. She's forming a true empathic link with you, Lavera explained, her voice filled with wonder. It should be impossible with a human. And yet, she touched her own antennae thoughtfully. Perhaps this is why our ancestors spoke of star-crossed bonds. James moved to sit beside Mira, who immediately crawled into his lap with her book. As he began to read, he felt her happiness like sunshine in his mind. Lavera moved closer, her own antennae giving off a soft purple glow, a color James had never seen before. What does purple mean? He asked during a pause in the story. Lavera's silvery skin flushed slightly darker. It is complex. It means change and hope and, she hesitated, new beginnings. Their moment was interrupted by an alert on James's military comm unit. His expression grew serious as he read the message. What's wrong? Lavera asked, sensing his mood shift. Command wants to meet about my unprecedented situation tomorrow. He looked at them both. They're bringing in HFY High Council members too. Myra's grip on the book tightened. You won't leave us, will you, second father? James hugged her close, feeling her fear and need through their growing bond. Never, little star. We'll figure this out together. Lavera's antennae glowed purple again as she watched them. And this time, James thought he understood what that color might really mean. The morning started with angry voices outside the refugee center. James arrived to find a crowd of protesters holding signs. Humans first, and no alien integration. His jaw tightened as he pushed through them to reach the entrance. Inside, he found Myra hiding under her bed, her antennae completely dark, a sign of extreme distress. Lavera sat nearby, trying to coax her out. I can feel their anger, Myra whispered. It hurts, second father. James knelt down beside the bed. Remember what we practiced. Build the wall in your mind, just like in your picture books. Lavera watched in amazement as Mira's antennae slowly began to glow again. You're teaching her emotional shielding, but that's advanced empathic training. I've been reading about HFY abilities, James admitted. I wanted to help. Before Lavera could respond, James's comm unit buzzed. His face darkened as he read the message. What's wrong? Lavera asked, her own antennae sensing his tension. I'm being reassigned. They want me on the outer colonies, effective immediately. He looked up at them. I'm supposed to leave tomorrow. No. Mira crawled out quickly, wrapping her arms around his leg. The lights in the room flickered with her distress. You promised. James picked her up, feeling her fear and pain through their strengthening bond. I'm not going anywhere, little star. I'll figure something out. Lavera stood, her silver skin shimmering with emotion. They cannot separate a bonded family. It's against both our laws and yours. The military doesn't recognize empathic bonds, James said quietly. But then he straightened, an idea forming. But they do recognize adoption rights. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the center. James's military training kicked in as he moved to the window. The protesters had grown violent, throwing things at the building's shields. Pack essentials only, he ordered, switching to soldier mode. We need to move you to a secure location. As they quickly gathered their things, James's comm unit lit up again. This time, it was a message from an old friend in security. Woi Ticha out. Heard chatter. Some protesters planning to breach south entrance, not just anti-alien, looking for specific targets. They're after us. Lavera asked, reading over his shoulder. You're not just any refugees, James explained, checking his sidearm. Your mate was a leading scientist. These might not be simple protesters. Mira suddenly stiffened, her antennae standing straight up. Bad people coming. Like before. Like home. James and Lavera shared a look. They both remembered the raiders who had destroyed their colony. Could there be a connection? The lights flickered again, but this time it wasn't from Mira's emotions. The power was being tampered with. New route, James decided, pulling up the building's layout on his comm. We'll use the maintenance tunnels. Lavera, can you carry Mira? I need my hands free. Lavera lifted her daughter, her own military training from her youth showing in her movements. James felt a surge of admiration. She was no helpless refugee. As they moved toward the secret exit, Mira pressed her face into her mother's shoulder. Second father, she whispered. The bad people. They're looking for father's research. I can feel it in their minds. James paused. Your father's research. What was he working on? Lavera's expression grew worried. Something that could change everything between our species. He called it the Empathy Bridge Protocol. The power went out completely, plunging them into darkness. In the distance, they heard the sound of explosions. Tell me more once we're safe, James said, activating his emergency lights. Right now, we need to move. And tomorrow. He looked at them both with determination. Tomorrow, we make this family official, no matter what anyone says. Dawn broke over the military safe house where James had brought Lavera and Mira after their escape. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at two datapads. One held his resignation papers. The other contained adoption forms for Mira. You don't have to do this, Lavera said softly, entering the room. Her silvery skin caught the morning light, making her look almost ethereal. Yes, I do. James pushed both datapads away and rubbed his tired eyes. They're trying to force my hand with this reassignment. I won't abandon you both. Mira appeared from her temporary room, clutching the stuffed earth cat James had given her. Her antennae drooped with worry. Bad dreams again, she murmured, climbing into his lap. The raiders? James asked, feeling her distress through their strengthening bond. She nodded against his chest. They were hurting father. He was trying to protect something. A secret. Her antennae twisted in confusion. A bridge between minds. Lavera's markings pulsed with surprise. The Empathy Bridge Protocol. Valon said it could change everything. Allow humans to form empathic bonds like our people. Is that even possible? James asked, unconsciously running a soothing hand over Mira's hair as she relaxed against him. Theoretically, Lavera sat down beside them. But it would make both species vulnerable if it fell into the wrong hands. A sharp knock at the door cut her off. James immediately tensed, but through the security camera, he saw Colonel Hayes. Sergeant Chen, she said when he let her in, then stopped at the domestic scene before her, James still holding Mira, Lavera standing protectively nearby. I see the reports were correct. Ma'am, About my reassignment. That's why I'm here. She held up a hand. We've confirmed the protesters were working with the raiders. They're after something specific, something Dr. Valon was working on. The empathy bridge, Mira said sleepily, her antennae glowing faintly as she picked up the colonel's thoughts. Colonel Hayes startled. How did she? Never mind. Yes, and we think they're specifically targeting families like yours, mixed human and exotheory households. There are others, but you're the only one with a direct connection to the research. James felt Lavera's fear spike through the room's emotional atmosphere. He made his decision. I'm resigning my commission, he said firmly, and I'm formally adopting Mira. We'll protect ourselves. The colonel smiled, surprising them all. Actually, I have a better idea. She pulled out another datapad. New assignment, Head of Security for the Joint Species Family Protection Unit. You'll work with both human and exotheory forces to protect families like yours while we track down these raiders. You're creating a whole unit for this? Lavera asked. We have to. The colonel's expression grew serious. There are more mixed families forming every day. This is the future, whether the raiders like it or not. And you three, you're proof it can work. Mira suddenly sat up, her antennae glowing bright gold, a color James had never seen before. What does gold mean? He asked Lavera. She smiled, her own antennae shifting to match. It means family. True family, chosen and bonded. She looked at James with an expression that made his heart skip. It means home. Then it settled, James said, reaching for the colonel's datapad. But I have one condition. He pulled the adoption papers forward. This happens first. Mira becomes legally mine, under both human and exotheory law. Second father becomes true father, Mira asked hopefully. More than that, Lavera said, her markings pulsing with those complex purple waves again. We become a real family. As James signed the papers, Mira's happiness flooded the room like sunshine, and even the colonel found herself smiling. None of them noticed the small drone watching through the window, its camera recording everything for someone very interested in this unique family unit. 1 month after the adoption, James sat in the garden of their new home, watching Mira play with both human and exotheory children. Her antennae glowed with rainbow colors as she taught her friends to play Earth games while incorporating exotheory empathic exercises. She's becoming a bridge between our peoples, Lavera said softly, sitting beside him, just like Valon dreamed. James turned to look at her, noticing how the setting sun made her silvery skin shimmer. These quiet moments together had become more frequent, and with them came feelings he couldn't ignore anymore. Lavera, he started, then hesitated. Through their growing family bond, she felt his nervousness. I feel it too, she said, her antennae glowing that now familiar purple. This connection between us, it's more than just Mira's bond linking us. Before James could respond, Mira came running over. Father, Mother, look what I can do. She closed her eyes in concentration, and suddenly James felt a wave of pure joy wash over him, stronger and more controlled than her usual emotional projections. That's amazing, little star, James praised, but Lavera looked concerned. Mira, you're developing too fast. These abilities shouldn't be this strong yet. It's because of Father, Mira said simply. His love makes me stronger. She skipped back to her friends, leaving her parents in stunned silence. Is that possible? James asked. Lavera's antennae twitched thoughtfully. Valon's research suggested that human emotions, while not naturally empathic, are incredibly powerful. Perhaps, she placed her hand over his, perhaps that's why I'm falling in love with you. James's heart raced. Before he could speak, his security system chimed. The perimeter cameras showed Counselor Xerex approaching with 2 other exotheory officials. Lavera, the counselor called, as they entered the garden. We must speak about this situation. The children scattered at the officials' arrival, sensing their stern disapproval. Mira ran to James, who picked her up protectively. "What situation?" Lavera asked, standing tall. "This unauthorized pair bonding with the human," one official said. "It violates our oldest laws, and the child's accelerated abilities raise concerns." "You mean they frighten you?" James said quietly, feeling their fear through Mira's connection. "They should," the third official snapped. "She's becoming too powerful, too human. And now we hear you're leading a unit to encourage more mixed families." "We're protecting those families," James corrected, "from the same raiders who killed Valon." Zirex's antennae flattened. Valon's death was tragic, but his research was dangerous. Humans aren't meant to share our empathic abilities. The natural order must be preserved. Natural order. Lavera's voice carried that strange resonance again. Like the natural order that says I can't love a human. That my daughter can't call him father. The garden's lights began to flicker as Mira's emotions affected the power grid. But instead of fear or anger, James felt love pouring from her, directed at both him and Lavera. "Look," he said to the officials. "Really look at what's happening here." The three Exatheri couldn't help but feel it. Mira's pure love, Lavera's fierce devotion, and even James's emotions bleeding through their shared bonds. Their antennae wavered uncertainly. "The raiders want to stop this," James continued. "They fear what we represent, that humans and Exatheri can be more together than apart. That love doesn't care about species." Zirex stared at them for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "The High Council will not approve." "Then they'll have to disapprove," Lavera said firmly, taking James's free hand. "Because we are a family. Nothing will change that." As if to emphasize her point, all the garden lights suddenly blazed brilliantly. Mira giggled, and James felt Lavera's love wrap around them both like a warm blanket. The officials left shortly after, but James knew this wasn't over. Still, as he held Mira and felt Lavera's hand in his, he knew they would face whatever came next together. The attack came at midnight. James woke to the sound of Mira screaming, not in fear, but in warning. Her empathic abilities had sensed the raiders before they breached the perimeter. "They're here," she cried, running into her parents' room. "The bad people from my dreams." James was already moving, grabbing his weapon and activating the house's defense systems. Lavera's antennae glowed bright red, the color of battle readiness among her people. 8 of them, Mira reported, her antennae stretched to full height as she scanned their emotions. "They want Father's research notes. They think we have them." "The empathy bridge protocol," Lavera whispered. "Valon must have hidden it somewhere." The house shook as the raiders began their assault. James's security systems would hold them off, but not forever. "Mira, remember the safe room we practiced?" James asked, keeping his voice calm despite the danger. She nodded. "Good. But this time, we're doing something different. Your mother and I need your help." Lavera looked at him sharply. "James, she's just a child." "A child with more empathic power than any Exatheri I've seen," he replied. "Mira, remember how you share happiness with your friends. Can you share my combat training with your mother?" Myra's eyes widened with understanding, like a bridge between minds. An explosion rocked the house. The raiders were getting closer. "Quick, little star," James said, kneeling before her. "Connect us all." Mira closed her eyes in concentration. James felt the familiar warm touch of her mind, but this time it was different. Suddenly, he could sense Lavera's thoughts, her military memories from her youth flooding into his mind. At the same time, his years of combat experience flowed into Lavera's consciousness. "By the stars," Lavera gasped, instinctively shifting into a perfect military stance. "I can feel everything you know about fighting. And I can feel your Exatheri battle techniques," James said with wonder. "Mira, you're doing it. You're making your own version of the empathy bridge." Their daughter beamed with pride, but the moment was interrupted by another explosion, closer this time. "They're trying to take us alive," Mira reported, reading the raiders' intentions. "They think we know where Father hid his research." James and Lavera moved in perfect sync now, their shared combat knowledge making them twice as effective. They positioned themselves around Mira as the first raiders breached the house. "Remember what I taught you about emotional walls?" James asked Mira. She nodded. "Good. Now do the opposite. Show them everything you feel about family." Understanding dawned on Lavera's face. Of course. Overwhelming emotional projection. It can incapacitate those who aren't prepared. The first raider burst through the door, and Mira struck. She projected all her love for her parents, all her happiness in their family, all her grief for her lost father. A tidal wave of pure emotion that sent the unprepared raider staggering. James and Lavera moved as one, their shared combat knowledge making them unstoppable. More raiders poured in, but they were unprepared for this unique family's defense. "The research," one raider shouted. "Find Valon's research." Mira suddenly stiffened. Through their connection, James and Lavera felt her surprise. "Father's research," she whispered. "I understand now. It's not notes or data." She touched her head. "It's me. I'm the bridge." The revelation hit just as the raiders' leader appeared, holding a strange device. "Stand down," he ordered, "or I'll shut down every empathic mind in this room." James felt Mira's fear spike through their bond, but also her determination. She looked at both her parents, her antennae glowing with a new color, silver and gold combined. "Trust me," she said simply. And then she closed her eyes, preparing to show everyone exactly what a human exotheri child could do. Mira stood between her parents, facing the raiders and their empathic disruption device. But instead of fear, her antennae glowed with that unique silver-gold light, the perfect blend of human determination and exotheri power. "Last chance," the raider leader growled. "Come quietly, or we shut down your empathic abilities permanently." Through their family bond, James felt Mira's response before she spoke. "No," she said clearly. "Father's research wasn't about controlling empathy. It was about love." She stretched out her hands, one toward each parent. The lights in the house began to pulse with her heartbeat. "Valon knew," Lavera whispered, understanding flooding through their bond. He knew that natural bonds between humans and exotheri would create something new, something stronger. The raider activated his device. Mira flinched but didn't fall. Instead, her antennae glowed brighter. "Impossible," the raider shouted. "This should disable all empathic abilities." "You can't disable love," Mira said simply. Then she did something extraordinary. She opened her heart and mind completely, sharing not just emotions, but the pure truth of her family's bond with everyone in the room. Raiders staggered as they felt it all. James's fierce protective love, Lavera's deep devotion, Mira's joy in having both her parents. The device overloaded, sparking uselessly. "This is what Father discovered," Mira explained, her voice carrying that same resonance her mother sometimes had. "Humans and exotheri together make both species better. The bridge isn't a weapon or a tool, it's understanding." Through the windows, James saw military vehicles arriving, both human and exotheri forces, led by Colonel Hayes and Counselor Xerex. "Stand down," Hayes ordered through a megaphone. "We have you surrounded." The raiders, still reeling from Mira's emotional projection, surrendered without further fight. As they were led away, Xerex approached the family. "Now I understand why Valon chose to hide his research in his daughter," the counselor said, his antennae showing respect. "She is not just a bridge between minds, but between worlds." "And she's not alone anymore," Colonel Hayes added, gesturing to the gathered crowd. Other mixed human exotheri families had arrived, drawn by Mira's emotional broadcast. Their children's antennae all glowed with variations of that same silver-gold light. "See," Mira said proudly, "love finds a way, just like Father knew it would." 3 months later, the garden of their restored home was filled with joy again, but this time for a celebration. James and Lavera stood together under an arch made of earth flowers and glowing Xathiri crystals. The council recognizes this bond, Xerex announced, now their strongest supporter. As we recognize all true family bonds, regardless of origin. Mira walked between them, carrying rings and traditional Xathiri bonding crystals. Her antennae glowed with pure happiness as her parents exchanged both human and Xathiri vows. I now pronounce you life partners. Colonel Hayes concluded the ceremony, under both human and Xathiri law. At that moment, Mira threw her arms around both parents, and every light in the garden blazed with silver-gold brilliance. Through their permanent family bond, they shared their joy not just with each other, but with everyone present. Later that evening, as they watched the sunset together, James looked at his new wife and daughter, his family. Your father would be proud, he told them both. His dream of bringing our peoples together came true. No, Mira corrected, her antennae glowing with that special light that meant family. It's just beginning. Look. She pointed to where her friends played, human and Xathiri children, learning to share emotions and understanding naturally, without any need for research or protocols. Lavera leaned against James, her antennae matching Mira's glow. A new dawn for both our peoples, she said softly. And it all started because one human soldier couldn't leave a mother and child behind. Best decision I ever made, James said, holding his family close as the stars began to appear above them. The same stars that had brought them together and would watch over all the new families to come.